story of Beauty and the Beast, a reworked version of the original fairy tale by the French novelist Gabrielle Suzanne Barbeau de Villeneuve, published in 1740. In a faraway land stood a grand city where trade flourished abundantly. Among its citizens lived a merchant who succeeded in every enterprise he undertook. Fortune had always favored him generously. He was immensely wealthy, but he also had a large family, 6 sons and 6 daughters. None of his children were yet established in life. The boys were too young to think of it, and the girls, too proud of their wealth and status, hesitated to make a choice from their many admirers. Their vanity was flattered by the attentions of the finest gentlemen in the city. But suddenly, an unexpected reversal of fortune shattered their happiness. A devastating fire broke out in their home, destroying the splendid furniture, account books, gold, silver, and precious possessions that formed the merchant's wealth. This disaster was only the beginning of his misfortunes. The merchant soon received news that all his ships at sea had either been wrecked or captured by pirates. His business associates defrauded him, and his foreign agents betrayed him. From being one of the richest men in the city, he rapidly fell into total poverty. All he had left was a modest country house located in an isolated place more than 100 leagues from the city. To escape humiliation and despair, he decided to retreat there with his family. His children, especially his daughters, were horrified at the thought of such a dreary exile. At first, they hoped their suitors would eagerly propose marriage, now that they seemed more attainable. But they quickly realized their admirers vanished the moment fortune deserted them. Friends abandoned them just as quickly, and even those whom the merchant had most helped became his harshest critics, accusing him of foolish extravagance. Thus, the unhappy family retreated to their lonely country house, buried deep in a dense forest. Here they faced the harsh realities of rural life without servants or comforts. The merchant's sons took on difficult physical labor, while the daughters, accustomed only to leisure, found themselves forced to perform the duties of peasant girls. They wore simple woolen dresses, lacked even basic luxuries, and survived only on what their land produced. The elder daughters constantly complained, mourning their lost city life of glamour and entertainment. Only the youngest daughter faced this change with patience and fortitude. Although initially saddened by their misfortune, she soon regained her cheerful spirits. Deciding it was best to accept her new life, she attempted to comfort her family through kindness and optimism. Her father had given her and her sisters an excellent education. Now she used it to her advantage, singing beautifully and playing musical instruments to cheer them. But her sisters scorned her attempts at joy, calling her common and unrefined. Their harsh judgment was unfair, as she possessed a beauty and grace far superior to theirs. Her heart was generous and kind, and her calm strength in adversity showed true courage. Jealousy blinded her sisters to her virtues, and they mocked her pleasant attitude. But anyone who met her admired her deeply and nicknamed her simply Beauty, a title that only increased her sisters' envy. Though Beauty might easily have hoped for an advantageous marriage, she felt only compassion for her father's sufferings. Far from regretting their departure from the city, she found joy in the quiet pleasures of rural life. 2 years passed, and the family gradually adjusted to their new circumstances, until suddenly a spark of hope arrived. News reached the merchant that one of his lost ships had unexpectedly returned safely, heavily laden with goods. However, he learned that his dishonest partners were attempting to sell the cargo for their own benefit. Excited by this news, the merchant's daughters imagined themselves restored to prosperity. Eager to return to their former lives, they urged their father to travel immediately and secure the fortune. However, being cautious and practical, he decided to undertake the journey alone, leaving his sons to continue harvesting the fields. His daughters, apart from Beauty, were convinced their wealth would soon return. Forgetting the lessons of humility taught by hardship, they demanded expensive gifts and jewels from their father. Beauty, on the other hand, asked for nothing except that he return safely. Moved by her sincerity, he insisted she request something. Wanting only to please him without causing expense, Beauty finally asked for a single rose, a flower she dearly loved and greatly missed in their isolated home. The merchant set out on his journey with hopeful expectations. Yet, upon arriving in the city, he discovered bitter disappointment. His deceitful partners had already sold the ship's cargo, leaving him to spend months fighting legal battles. At last, with debts unpaid and hope lost, he began his return journey, disheartened and nearly penniless. Forced to travel in the harshest winter, he soon found himself caught in a blizzard in the forest near his home. Night fell, and bitterly cold and exhausted, he took shelter within a hollow tree. The night seemed endless, filled with hunger and terror of wild animals nearby. At dawn, he struggled to find a path through the deep snow, eventually stumbling onto an avenue leading to a magnificent castle untouched by winter's fury. The path was lined with orange trees, heavy with flowers and fruit, and strange, lifelike statues stood scattered throughout the gardens. Shivering from cold, the merchant hurried into the castle. Inside, he found beautiful rooms, all empty and silent, but warmed by a comforting fire. Utterly exhausted, he soon fell asleep by the hearth. When he awoke, he was astonished to see an exquisite meal laid out for him. Famished, he gratefully ate the food, wondering who had shown such kindness. After his meal, he explored further, hoping to meet his generous host, but no one appeared. Wandering through magnificent but empty halls, he felt a growing unease, uncertain whether this mysterious palace belonged to a man or a spirit. Though fear crept over him, the merchant resolved to find the owner and thank him directly. Yet, despite his earnest efforts, he found no one. The merchant began to seriously contemplate his situation, imagining, for some reason unknown to him, that perhaps a benevolent spirit had presented him this mansion, along with all the riches it contained. The idea felt inspired, and without delay, he decided to explore further, carefully noting all the treasures he found. Excited by his discoveries, he mentally planned how he would share these riches among his children, and even chose specific rooms suited to each of them, happily anticipating their joy when they arrived. Stepping into the garden, despite the harsh winter outside, he found the rarest flowers blooming, their fragrance drifting gently through the mild, fresh air. Birds of every sort were singing, their melodies mingling harmoniously with the gentle bubbling of fountains. Amazed and delighted, the old merchant said to himself, "My daughters will easily adjust to this lovely home. They surely won't miss city life here. Let me hurry back and bring them. Their joy will double my own. I'll claim this place immediately." When he had first entered the enchanting castle, although nearly frozen, he had thoughtfully led his horse to a stable he spotted near the front courtyard. A path lined with blooming roses led to it. Never before had he seen roses so beautiful, and their perfume reminded him of Beauty's request. Remembering his promise, he picked one rose, and was just about to gather more when a terrifying roar behind him made him spin around in fright. Before him stood a dreadful beast, glaring furiously. With a deep, growling voice, the creature thundered, "Who gave you permission to pluck my roses? Have I not been kind enough to let you stay in my palace? Instead of gratitude, you repay me by stealing my flowers? Your insolence will not go unpunished." Overcome with fear, the merchant immediately dropped the rose and fell to his knees, pleading, "My lord, have mercy. I meant no harm. I was deeply grateful for your generosity, and did not imagine such a small action would offend you." The beast replied angrily, "Silence. Spare me your flattery. I am no lord. I am the beast, and you will not escape the punishment you deserve." Terrified, the merchant, believing his only hope lay in submission, began pleading passionately. He explained that the rose was meant for his daughter, Beauty. Hoping either to avoid punishment or awaken the beast's compassion, he recounted his misfortunes and the purpose of his journey. He explained that Beauty had requested nothing but a single rose, while her sisters demanded costly gifts. He hoped the beast might forgive him for such an innocent mistake. After considering this briefly, the beast softened slightly. He said in a calmer voice, "I will spare your life, but only on one condition. You must bring me one of your daughters to make amends." The merchant cried out in despair. "How could I ever agree to such a demand? Could I be so cruel as to trade my life for one of my children's? How could I possibly persuade any of them to come?" "No tricks," the beast interrupted. "She must come willingly, or I won't accept her. Go home. Find out if any daughter loves you enough to sacrifice herself to save you. You appear honest. Promise me, on your honor, you'll return in a month. If you find a willing daughter, bring her back. If not, you must return alone to face your fate. Don't even think of breaking your promise. If you try to evade me, I will hunt you down and destroy you and your family, even if 100,000 men protect you." Though convinced none of his daughters would ever agree to such terms, the merchant reluctantly accepted the beast's condition, promising to return in a month. Eager to escape the dreadful creature, he asked permission to depart immediately, but the beast refused. "You will leave tomorrow," he growled. "At dawn you'll find a horse ready to take you home. Now go, have supper, and await further instructions." More dead than alive, the poor man returned to the dining room, where a sumptuous supper awaited him by a roaring fire. Though grief robbed him of appetite, he feared angering the beast if he refused this hospitality, so he forced himself to eat. After finishing, he heard a loud noise, announcing the beast's return. Trying to control his fear, he faced his intimidating host. "Did you have a good supper?" asked the beast abruptly. "Thanks to your generosity, yes," the merchant replied timidly. "Remember your promise," said the beast sternly, "and keep your word. Return with one of your daughters, or come back alone." The merchant promised again, assuring the beast he would honestly tell his daughter of the sacrifice required. The beast warned him to clearly explain everything, especially how terrifying his appearance was, and to ensure she understood her fate completely. Once she arrived, there would be no turning back. With sorrow, the merchant agreed to these conditions. The beast told him to rest until dawn, then enjoy breakfast before leaving, and reminded him to take a rose for Beauty. "The horse will be ready in the courtyard. I expect to see you in 1 month. If you fail, I will come for you myself." Hastily retreating to avoid further distress, the merchant slept fitfully until sunrise. After quickly eating, he sadly picked the rose meant for Beauty, mounted the horse provided, and sped swiftly away, grateful to leave the dreadful palace, but tormented by the knowledge he must soon return. As he journeyed home, anxiety overwhelmed him. "To what have I agreed?" he lamented. "How can I live by sacrificing one of my children? Could I ever persuade them? Surely they would refuse. Even if one were brave enough to come, the mere sight of the beast would destroy her resolve." Yet, when he tried to turn back, his horse refused, galloping relentlessly toward home. The merchant resolved never to reveal the beast's terrible condition, determined instead to say his goodbyes silently and accept his fate bravely. At last, his home came into view. His family, distressed by his horse's earlier return without him, eagerly awaited news at the door. Seeing him mounted on a magnificent horse and wrapped in a rich cloak, they first mistook him for a messenger. The sight of the rose on the saddle reassured them momentarily. As he drew closer, they recognized him, joyfully rushing forward. But noticing his tear-filled eyes and sorrowful expression, their excitement turned to dread. Beauty approached him, and handing her the rose, he sadly said, "Here is your rose, my dear, but it will cost us dearly." The eldest sister sneered. Of course only Beauty's request would be granted. Such extravagance. A rose in winter must have cost more than all our requests combined. "True," the merchant said mournfully. "The price I must pay for this rose is heavier than any gift you requested, and far more painful." His words provoked anxious questions, forcing him to break his resolve and explain everything: the failed journey, the false hope, and the terrifying agreement with the beast. Upon hearing this, despair replaced hope. The daughters sobbed bitterly, their dreams crushed. Their brothers vowed fiercely to slay the beast and save their father. Yet the merchant forbade any violence, determined to honor his word or die trying. In vain, the brothers begged their sisters for self-sacrifice. Bitter jealousy prevented any such heroic decision. They angrily blamed Beauty, declaring, "Why didn't she ask for jewels like us? Her fake humility has doomed us all." But she, by her peculiar desire, had brought misfortune upon them all. Her sisters insisted, "She has caused this trouble herself, so she alone must find the solution. We refuse to be sacrificed for her whims." Beauty, nearly overwhelmed by grief, stifled her sobs and gently replied to her sisters, "Yes, I alone caused this misfortune, and it is only right that I alone should fix it. I admit it would be unfair for you to suffer because of my mistake. But how could I have guessed such an innocent wish, a simple rose in the middle of summer, would be so severely punished? Still, the fault is mine, whether innocent or not, and I must bear the consequences. I shall risk my life," she continued firmly, "to free my father from his deadly promise. I will seek the beast. I will consider myself fortunate if I can die to save my father who gave me life, and thus end your complaints. But I beg you, please spare me your harsh words for this month." Such resolve from a girl of her age astonished everyone. Her brothers, who loved her dearly, admired her courage and showed her immense tenderness, deeply saddened by the sacrifice she was about to make. Yet they knew this was necessary to save their father's life, and this knowledge silenced their objections. Rather than oppose her noble decision, they praised her bravery, all the more touching since she was only 16 and had every right to regret losing her life in such a cruel way. Her father, however, refused to consent to Beauty's sacrifice, but his other daughters bitterly accused him, claiming he only loved Beauty, despite her responsibility for their misfortune, and that he wished one of them would suffer in her place. Overwhelmed by their unjust accusations and moved by Beauty's insistence that she would leave without his consent if necessary, the merchant reluctantly gave in. Beauty forced herself to appear calm and said, "Who knows? Perhaps this dreadful fate holds something happier than we can imagine." Her sisters maliciously smiled at what they considered foolish optimism, pleased by what they thought was Beauty's naive hope. Yet the merchant remembered an old prophecy stating that this daughter would one day save his life and bring happiness to their family. Thus, reluctantly, he stopped opposing her wishes. Gradually, the family began speaking of Beauty's departure as if it were unimportant. She herself set this tone, trying to comfort her father and brothers, making her fate seem almost cheerful to reassure them. Despite her sister's harshness, they even seemed eager for her departure and impatient for the month to pass. Beauty generously gave them her own belongings and jewelry. They accepted her kindness eagerly, though it did nothing to lessen their resentment. Finally, the day arrived. Her sisters felt deep satisfaction hearing the horse that had come to take Beauty away. Only her father and brothers were heartbroken. Desperate to stop this terrible event, they even suggested killing the horse. But Beauty, calm and composed, gently explained how absurd and impossible this idea was. She took an affectionate leave of her brothers, then tenderly embraced her cold-hearted sisters, even moving them briefly to tears. They almost believed for a moment that they felt true sorrow. Her father, urged by Beauty, mounted the horse, and she climbed behind him gracefully, as though embarking on a pleasant journey. The horse seemed to fly rather than run, but Beauty felt no discomfort. Its pace was as gentle as a soft breeze. During the journey, her father repeatedly begged her to let him go alone to the beast. "My dear child," he pleaded, "there's still time. This creature is more dreadful than you imagine. Your courage may vanish at the sight of him, and then we will both perish." "If I were seeking happiness," Beauty replied steadily, "perhaps my courage might fail. But as I expect only a quick death, does it matter if my executioner is handsome or terrifying?" Night fell as they spoke, yet the horse's swift pace did not slow. Suddenly the darkness vanished, replaced by spectacular fireworks, brilliant bursts, wheels of colour, dazzling suns, lighting the forest beautifully and warming the chill night air. Father and daughter found themselves on a path lined with blooming orange trees, brightly lit by hundreds of statues holding flaming torches. Countless lamps adorned the palace walls, forming intricate patterns and ciphers. As they entered the courtyard, a majestic salute of cannon fire mingled with music from countless instruments. Beauty whispered jokingly, "The beast must be very hungry to welcome his prey so grandly." Yet, despite her fears of approaching doom, she couldn't help but marvel at the extraordinary spectacle, remarking to her father that these preparations for her death were grander than the marriage celebrations of the richest king. They reached the palace steps, and Beauty eagerly stepped down. Her father guided her inside, entering the same room where he had first been welcomed. A roaring fire and fragrant candles illuminated a lavish feast awaiting them. Familiar now with the beast's hospitality, the merchant assured Beauty that the meal was prepared for them, and they could enjoy it freely. Beauty accepted without hesitation, reasoning that a good meal would neither hasten nor prevent her death. Perhaps her frankness and courage might soften the beast, making her fate less grim than feared. The fearsome creature had not yet appeared, and everything around them suggested joy rather than mourning. Her optimism was short-lived, though, as the beast soon made himself known. A dreadful noise echoed. The heavy steps, the clinking scales, and terrifying roars announced his approach. Beauty froze in terror, her father clinging desperately to her. Summoning her courage, Beauty steadied herself and respectfully greeted the beast, hiding her trembling. The creature, pleased by her composure, addressed her father in a voice frightening yet without anger. "Good evening, friend." Turning toward Beauty, he greeted her. "Good evening, Beauty." Her father, paralyzed by fear, couldn't answer. But Beauty calmly and sweetly replied, "Good evening, beast." "Do you come willingly?" the beast asked, "and will you let your father leave without following him?" Beauty firmly replied, "Yes, that is my decision." "What do you think awaits you after he leaves?" the beast inquired. "Whatever you wish," she answered bravely. "My life is yours. I submit completely." Satisfied, the beast addressed her father. "Tomorrow morning you will leave immediately after breakfast. Remember, you are forbidden to ever return here." Then, turning to Beauty, he instructed, "Take your father into the next room and fill 2 trunks with gifts for your family. Give them something valuable so they remember you." Despite the beast's generosity, Beauty felt sorrow at her father's imminent departure. But she obeyed, and the beast, bidding them good night, left the room. Alone, her father embraced her, weeping bitterly, regretting bringing her to this fate. The palace gates stood open, and he considered escaping with her. But Beauty reminded him of the consequences, persuading him to follow the beast's instructions instead. Together, they discovered a magnificent room filled with luxurious clothing, suitable for royalty. Beauty chose the finest garments, reflecting the beast's generosity rather than her family's current circumstances. Opening another cabinet, she was stunned by a dazzling collection of jewels. Carefully selecting pieces, she began packing them, until opening yet another cabinet filled with gold coins. "Father," she wisely suggested, "let's fill these trunks with gold instead. Jewels might attract envy or betrayal. Gold coins will let you quietly buy lands, houses, and treasures without danger." Agreeing with her wisdom, her father arranged the trunks, astonished they could hold so much, adjusting easily to whatever they placed inside. Yet despite these riches, he worried they couldn't carry such heavy loads home. "The beast is mocking us," he sighed sadly, pretending generosity but making it impossible to benefit from it. Be patient, Beauty urged gently. He surely intends for you to enjoy this gift. Close the trunks and leave them here. He'll arrange their transport. Comforted by her sensible advice, they returned to the dining room where breakfast awaited. Her father ate more cheerfully, hopeful despite sadness. Yet Beauty, uneasy, felt certain these treasures were compensation for her life, that once alone the beast would either devour her or keep her imprisoned forever. Lost in these troubling thoughts, she was startled by a bell signaling departure. Outside, 2 horses stood ready, one loaded with trunks, another waiting for her father. Saddled and stocked with provisions, the same gentle horse that first carried him was prepared for his journey home. Such kindness from the beast again gave them something to discuss, but the horses, neighing and pawing impatiently, reminded them it was time to part. Fearing to anger the beast by delaying, the merchant tearfully bid his daughter farewell forever. Immediately the horses set off faster than the wind, and Beauty soon lost sight of them. Weeping, Beauty returned to the chamber prepared for her, overwhelmed by sorrowful thoughts. At last, exhausted, she sought sleep, something she had not enjoyed properly for an entire month. As she prepared for bed, she noticed hot chocolate placed on the table. Drinking it drowsily, she soon drifted into a deep and restful sleep, something she had not experienced since her father brought back the fateful rose. As she slept, Beauty dreamed she stood beside a beautiful canal, bordered on each side by rows of enormous orange trees and blooming myrtles. Lost in sadness, she lamented the harsh fate that condemned her to remain in this place forever, without hope of escape. Suddenly, a young man appeared before her, as handsome as Cupid himself. He spoke in a voice that deeply touched her heart. "Do not despair, Beauty. Your destiny here is not as miserable as you fear. In this place, you shall receive the happiness unjustly denied to you elsewhere. Use your insight to release me from the disguise that hides my true form. Look upon me, and judge if my company would be so disagreeable or less preferable than the family unworthy of your goodness. Whatever you desire, you shall receive. I love you deeply, and only you can grant me happiness by being happy yourself. Do not deny me this joy. Your mind and beauty surpass all others, and together we will be perfectly happy." This charming young man knelt before her, passionately pleading in the tenderest language, begging her consent, and promising that she would always be free to choose her own fate. "What can I do?" Beauty asked him earnestly. "Trust your first feelings of gratitude," he urged. "Judge not by your eyes, and above all, never abandon me, release me from my torment." Then her dream shifted, and she found herself in an elegant chamber with a majestic lady of breathtaking beauty who inspired profound respect and affection. The lady said kindly, "Lovely Beauty, do not regret your choice. A brighter future awaits you. But to earn it, you must look beyond outward appearances." Her sleep lasted more than 5 hours, and throughout it, she saw the young man repeatedly, in 100 places, in countless situations. Sometimes he offered her grand celebrations. At other moments, he made passionate declarations. How pleasant was her sleep. She wished it would continue, but daylight forced her eyes open, and the delightful visions faded into a mere dream. A clock struck 12 times, repeating her name each time, compelling her to rise. To her surprise, she discovered a dressing table, fully prepared with everything a lady could require. Dressing quickly, she felt a surprising joy, though unsure why. She then proceeded to the dining room, where dinner awaited her. Eating alone, her meal passed quickly. Returning afterward to her room, she reclined on a sofa, again recalling the young man from her dreams. "I could make you happy," she remembered his words. "Perhaps that horrible beast keeps him prisoner," she thought. "But how can I free him? They warned me against being deceived by appearances. Perhaps I'm being foolish to dwell on dreams that disappear when awake. Instead, I must accept my reality and find ways to avoid sadness. Determined to distract herself, she began exploring the many rooms of the palace, enchanted by their splendor. First, she entered a large hall lined with mirrors, reflecting her from every side. There she noticed a bracelet hanging from a chandelier, bearing a portrait exactly like the handsome young man from her dream. How did she recognize him so clearly? His image was already deeply engraved in her mind, perhaps even her heart. Without thinking, she quickly slipped the bracelet onto her wrist. Next, she found herself in a gallery filled with paintings. There, she discovered a full-sized portrait of the same young man, his eyes gazing at her so tenderly that she blushed as if he were truly present, reading her thoughts. Moving onward, she reached a grand room full of musical instruments. Being talented in music, she played several, finally settling at the harpsichord, which best suited her singing. She continued exploring and soon discovered another vast gallery filled entirely with books. She adored reading, and since her father had been forced to sell his library, she had missed this pleasure greatly. Now she had endless reading material to help pass the time and ease her loneliness. Before she could finish exploring, night arrived, and every room lit up beautifully with candles placed in chandeliers made not of crystal, but of glittering diamonds and rubies. At the usual hour, Beauty found her supper served elegantly as before. Though alone, she no longer felt troubled by solitude, until she heard the beast approaching. This being her first private encounter, she trembled, fearing he intended to devour her. Yet when he arrived calmly, her fears faded somewhat. "Good evening, Beauty," he greeted her roughly. She replied quietly, but with a tremble, "Good evening, Beast." He asked how she had occupied her time. Beauty answered politely, "I spent the day exploring your palace. It's so vast, I couldn't see everything yet." "Do you think you'll grow accustomed to living here?" he asked. She replied graciously that she found the palace very beautiful and could certainly live there comfortably. After nearly an hour's conversation, Beauty realized his frightening voice came simply from his nature, and that the beast was more awkward than cruel. But suddenly he bluntly asked, "Beauty, will you marry me?" At this abrupt question, terror seized her again. Crying out in distress, she exclaimed, "Oh, heavens, I'm lost!" "No," he replied calmly. "Just answer without fear. Say clearly yes or no." Trembling, she whispered, "No, Beast." "Then I shall leave you," replied the monster mildly. "Good night, Beauty." "Good night, Beast," she answered, greatly relieved. Reassured that no harm would come to her, she went peacefully to sleep. Immediately, her mysterious dream visitor returned, whispering tenderly, "How happy I am to see you again, dear Beauty. But your rejection pains me deeply, and I fear I must remain unhappy for a long time." Throughout the night, the young man appeared repeatedly in a mix of joy and sorrow, at times offering her a crown, other times weeping passionately. His sadness and devotion touched her deeply. Awakening the next morning, still filled with thoughts of him, she hurried to the portrait gallery to confirm her memories. She studied his picture intently, recognizing him even more clearly. Eventually, embarrassed by her fascination, she simply admired the miniature on her wrist. To clear her mind, she went into the gardens, dazzled by their extraordinary beauty. Marvelous statues, countless fountains, and abundant greenery delighted her eyes. Yet, surprisingly, she recognized places from her dreams, especially a grand canal lined with orange, trees and blooming myrtle. It was exactly as she had seen it while dreaming. The vision no longer seemed like a mere illusion. Struck by this realization, she wondered if the mysterious young man was imprisoned somewhere in the palace. Determined to uncover the truth, she resolved to ask the beast directly during his evening visit. She spent the rest of the day wandering as far as her strength would allow, trying to see more of the palace. The apartments she had missed the previous day were just as magnificent as the rest. Among many beautiful and unusual rooms, she found one filled entirely with everything needed for crafts and handiwork: embroidery hoops, knitting tools, spools of thread, fine scissors, silk ribbons, and every accessory a lady could desire. It was all arranged with exquisite care, clearly prepared with her pleasure in mind. In the same room, she discovered a large gilded aviary filled with songbirds of every colour. As she entered, the birds burst into song, forming a chorus so sweet and harmonious that it filled her with delight. They fluttered happily around her, some landing gently on her shoulders, all eager to be near her. She smiled at them, saying affectionately, "Charming little friends, I would love to keep you closer to my room so I could hear you more often." To her surprise, at the very moment she spoke, a hidden door opened beside her, leading directly into her own chamber. She was amazed. It turned out the aviary was right next to her room, connected by a cleverly concealed panel. When closed, it completely blocked out the sound of the birds, preserving quiet when needed. The thoughtful design of it all touched her deeply. As she continued exploring, she came across another aviary, this one filled with parrots of every variety and hue. As soon as she entered, the birds began speaking in human-like voices. One greeted her cheerfully with, "Good morning." Another asked for breakfast. One more flirtatious parrot begged for a kiss, while others sang songs, quoted famous verses, and performed short dialogues, all seemingly meant to amuse her. They were gentle, intelligent, and affectionate. Pleased to have someone, or something, to talk with, Beauty began asking them questions, and several of the parrots answered with clarity and wit. She picked out one parrot as her favourite, finding him particularly entertaining. The others, however, seemed jealous and squawked in protest. Laughing, she comforted them with kind words and gentle strokes, promising they could all visit her whenever they liked. Nearby, she discovered yet another curious room, this one filled with monkeys of every size and colour, some small and dainty, others large and stately, some with beards, some without, all dressed in bright and elaborate court costumes. They greeted her with theatrical bows and flourishes, clearly delighted to see her. To celebrate her arrival, they performed dances, acrobatics, and feats of agility that amazed her. She was greatly amused, though still wistful that she had found no clue about the handsome stranger from her dreams. Thinking it foolish to hope any longer, she tried to push the memory aside. She praised the monkeys for their talents and affectionately said, "I wish some of you could follow me around and keep me company." Instantly, two tall monkeys in elegant attire stepped forward with great dignity and positioned themselves at her side like attendants. Two smaller monkeys dressed as pages lifted the train of her gown. A clever-looking baboon, dressed like a Spanish nobleman and wearing gloves, offered her his paw and escorted her to supper. During her meal, the parrots and songbirds performed again, singing harmoniously, whistling along with the music, and filling the dining room with joyful sound. Meanwhile, the monkeys waited on her with the ceremony and precision of a royal household. Everything they did, serving dishes, clearing the table, attending to her needs, was done with grace and perfect manners. After supper, another group of monkeys entertained her with a theatrical performance. Dressed in richly embroidered costumes glittering with pearls and jewels, they enacted a tragic play. The dialogue, spoken with clarity and emotion, came from parrots cleverly hidden in their costumes, some beneath wigs, others under cloaks, so realistically that Beauty would have believed the monkeys were speaking themselves had she not known better. The play seemed written just for them, and Beauty was thoroughly enchanted. At the end, one of the monkeys came forward and delivered a charming little speech, thanking her for her kindness and attention. The cast then gracefully withdrew, leaving only her personal attendants and the monkeys selected to keep her company. That evening, as always, the Beast arrived. After exchanging their usual greetings, he asked how she had passed the day. Their conversation followed its familiar path, and then, as always, ended with his question, "Beauty, will you marry me?" Still unready to say yes, she gently but firmly answered, "No, beast." "Then good night, Beauty," he replied with the same resigned voice. "Good night, beast," she said softly. Her monkey attendants, now acting as ladies-in-waiting, helped her undress and settle into bed. One of them opened the window to the aviary, allowing the soft nighttime warbling of the birds to lull her to sleep. That night, she dreamed again of the mysterious young man. He came to her with the same tender affection, his voice filled with both longing and sorrow. He spoke of the pain her refusal caused him, though he still loved her deeply. Once more he appeared in many forms, in joy, in sadness, in celebration, and in despair, each vision more vivid than the last. When she awoke, her mind was flooded with thoughts of him. She hurried to the portrait gallery to look again at his image. She gazed at it for a long time, trying to calm her heart. Then, gently touching the miniature on her bracelet, she whispered, "How real you feel to me." Eager to shake off the emotion, she descended once more into the gardens. The beauty of the place overwhelmed her. Graceful sculptures, crystal-clear fountains, and shady groves delighted her senses. She marveled again at the sight of the canal lined with orange and myrtle trees. It was exactly the place she had seen in her dream. Could it truly have been a vision? Or was it more than that? She couldn't help but wonder again. Was the young man real? Was he trapped here, somewhere in the palace? Was the beast hiding him? She promised herself that tonight she would finally ask the beast the truth. She spent the rest of the day walking through the palace gardens and halls, lost in thought. The possibility that the handsome young man of her dreams was real stirred something powerful within her, a longing, a need to understand the mystery. Each step she took, each path she retraced through the familiar splendor, brought her back to the same thought. Could he truly be here, hidden behind the beast's strange silence? She paused by a marble fountain where silver fish darted beneath glassy water, and she watched the surface ripple in slow, perfect circles. Above her, the sun filtered through flowering trellises, casting shifting patterns on the stone paths. She could not shake the feeling that the entire palace was trying to tell her something, whispering answers just beyond her reach. As evening approached, she returned to the room she had visited only once before. A grand salon she hadn't yet explored in full. Something about it called to her now, as if it might hold an answer. The doors opened silently before her, and she stepped inside. This room was unlike the others. Though no less beautiful, there was a solemn stillness here, a kind of reverent quiet. The walls were lined with rich tapestries and golden-framed portraits, though these were veiled by delicate gauze that seemed to shimmer in the candlelight. In the center of the room stood a great pedestal carved from marble, and atop it, under a dome of crystal, was a single rose. The rose was breathtaking, more perfect than any she had ever seen, glowing faintly as though lit from within. Its petals moved slightly, not from any breeze, but as if the flower were breathing. Beauty stood in awe, hesitant to draw near. But she felt drawn to it, as if something vital rested in its bloom. She did not touch it. She only stood silently before it, wondering if this rose, like the one she had once requested, was at the heart of something far greater than she understood. It felt like looking into the heart of the palace itself, fragile yet pulsing with ancient life. She remembered the look in the beast's eyes when she first asked for it. That simple request had led her here. Had it been more than coincidence? Had the magic begun then? That night after supper, the beast came to her as always. She was unusually quiet as they sat together, and he noticed it. "You are troubled," he said, his voice low and gruff, but not unkind. "Yes," she replied. "I have something I must ask you." "Speak freely." She looked into his strange, sad eyes. "I see him every night," she said softly. "The prince. He speaks to me as if I could save him. Is it you, beast?" The beast was silent for a moment. Then he said simply, "You must not let dreams mislead you, Beauty." "Is it a dream?" she asked. "Because the places I see in my dreams, your canal, the gardens, are here, exactly as I saw them, and the portrait I found, the miniature. He is real. I feel it." The beast turned his face slightly, not answering right away. "All will be revealed, in time," he said. "But do not ask me more." Her heart sank. She wanted to press him, to beg for the truth, but something in his voice stopped her. There was pain there, and something deeper, longing, and perhaps love. He stood. "As always, Beauty," he said quietly. "Will you marry me?" She lowered her gaze, torn more than ever. "No, Beast." He nodded. "Then good night, Beauty." "Good night, Beast." He left, and Beauty stood alone in the silence, staring after him. She crossed the room slowly and sat at the window, gazing out at the moonlit courtyard. The statues below were still, but she imagined they too were waiting for something to change. That night, as soon as she lay in bed, her dream returned. But it was different now. The young man looked more sorrowful than ever. He reached for her hands, pleading. "Why do you not see?" he asked. "Why do you hesitate? Your choice has power. You alone can break this curse." Beauty reached for him, but her hands passed through air. The dream dissolved, and she awoke before dawn, the air in her room unusually cold. She sat up slowly, whispering into the shadows, "What curse?" The palace gave no answer, but her heart was beginning to know. In the stillness of that early morning, she wrapped herself in a robe and wandered again through the halls. The mirrors reflected her quiet figure with ghost-like precision, and her footsteps echoed like whispers. She paused before the rose once more. One petal had fallen. Time was moving, and something was coming to an end. In the days that followed, Beauty's thoughts were never far from the dream and the mysterious young man who filled it. She wandered the palace, as if searching for something just out of reach, a key to understanding, a sign, anything that might connect her dreams to her waking world. The palace, though magnificent, began to feel like a kind of gilded cage. Its wonders, rooms that sparkled with magic, gardens that never wilted, and animals that seemed half-human in understanding, could not distract her for long. Each hallway echoed with her quiet footsteps and unspoken questions. Each open window framed a world she could no longer touch. Each evening the beast visited her, and each evening he asked the same question, always with quiet hope, always with sorrow behind his eyes. "Beauty, will you marry me?" And each time, gently but firmly, she replied, "No, Beast." Afterward he would bow his head and say, "Good night, Beauty," and disappear into the shadows of the palace, leaving her once again to dream of the young man with pleading eyes and outstretched hands. She began to observe the beast more closely. Sometimes, as he spoke, there was something in his tone, an echo of the voice from her dreams, that made her pause, heart skipping. In those twilight hours when they sat together in the flickering candlelight, she noticed his quiet attentiveness, the sadness in his voice, the way he waited on her answer, not with entitlement, but with the steady pain of someone who already expected refusal. There was something human in his gaze, something lonely, something familiar. She began to notice other things as well. He never looked away when she spoke. He listened not only to her words, but to the spaces between them. And he never pressed her, never grew angry at her refusals. He simply waited, as though hope itself was enough to keep him alive. And yet, each time he asked the question, fear still gripped her. Could I love something so strange, so terrifying in form? She wondered. Could love truly look past that? Could his soul be the same as the one I see in my dreams? One morning she found herself standing once more before the enchanted rose beneath the glass dome. This time she dared step closer. She noticed now what she had not seen before. The petals were falling, one by one, slowly, gently, but steadily, and she sensed, deep in her spirit, that this flower marked time. Not ordinary time, but something sacred, something binding. It is fading, she thought, and when the last petal falls, something will end. She grew restless. Despite the comforts of the palace, the beauty, the songs of birds, and the acrobatic cheer of the monkeys, an ache began to grow in her chest. She missed her father. She missed her brothers. She even missed her sisters, cold as they had been. She missed the world beyond the walls. One evening, when the beast arrived as usual, she turned to him before he could speak. "Beast," she said softly, "you have given me everything I could wish for. Comfort, beauty, freedom within this place. But I miss my father. I miss my family. Let me go and see them, just for a week." The beast stared at her, stricken. "You wish to leave me?" he asked. "No," she said quickly. "Only for a time. I promise I will return." He turned away for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was strained. "If you do not return in 7 days," he said, "I will die." Beauty's heart trembled. "I swear I will come back," she said. The beast said nothing more. That night, when Beauty went to her bed, she found a ring on her pillow. A large, glimmering ring, set with a single black stone. Beneath it was a note in the beast's careful hand. "Place this ring on your finger before you sleep, and it will take you where you wish to go. When you are ready to return, place it on your bedside and say, 'Take me back to my beast.'" She held the ring tightly in her hand for a long time before slipping it on. Her chest ached with uncertainty. As she lay in bed, she stared at the ceiling, listening to the hush of the palace at rest. Her room, so lovely and serene, suddenly felt distant, as if the dream were already ending. That night, for the first time since she arrived, her dream did not come. The young man did not appear. No words of longing, no silent pleas. Only darkness, and in the darkness, the petals of a rose, falling, one by one. Each fall sounded like a whisper in the silence, a warning, and a countdown. At dawn, Beauty stood by her window, watching the garden below begin to glow with the first light of day. The birds were just beginning their morning chorus, and the dew sparkled like glass on every leaf. The palace was as peaceful and perfect as ever, but her heart felt heavy, burdened with a sense of unfinished purpose, with a love she had not fully understood until now. She turned to the ring on her finger. "Take me to my father," she whispered. As soon as she lay down and closed her eyes, a gentle wind seemed to sweep over her. The room faded away like mist dissolving into sunlight. When she opened her eyes again, she was no longer in the palace. She was in her old room, small, familiar, a little dusty, but warm with memory. Her heart leapt with recognition. She rushed from the bed and flung open the door. Her father was sitting by the hearth, older and thinner than she remembered, reading by the weak morning light. He looked up, stunned. "Beauty!" he cried, stumbling to his feet. She ran into his arms, and they held each other without words, tears flowing freely. For a long time they simply embraced, the crackling fire warming them as much as the love they shared. Her brothers entered next, overjoyed, and even her sisters, though surprised, tried to hide their jealousy behind stiff smiles. Her return brought with it not only joy, but also marvel. Her appearance, her poise, the rich gown she wore, the radiance in her face, they were changed, humbled, awed by her presence. For the first few days, Beauty was entirely absorbed in the happiness of being home. She cooked in the kitchen again, walked through the orchard, listened to her brother's stories, and sat beside her father in the evenings with her head on his shoulder. She told them little about the palace or the beast, only saying that he was kind and generous and had treated her well. Her father noticed a sadness in her eyes whenever she spoke of him, though she tried to hide it. Her laughter was gentler now, her gaze more distant. But time passed quickly, too quickly. On the 6th night, Beauty's dreams returned, but they were not like before. She stood once more in the garden of the beast's palace, but the flowers were withered, the fountains dry. The statues had fallen, the skies above were grey and heavy with storm. In the centre of the courtyard lay the beast, motionless, eyes closed, as if asleep or dead. She woke with a cry. It was still night. Her heart pounded with fear. One more day, she thought, just one more day. But the 7th day came and went. She stayed with her family, torn between love and guilt, trying to silence the unease in her chest. Surely the dream was only fear, she told herself. Surely he will be well. That night, as she lay in bed, the ring on her finger burned cold against her skin. She sat up suddenly, heart hammering in her chest. "Take me back to my beast," she whispered. She placed the ring on her bedside table and closed her eyes. At once the wind came again, stronger this time and colder. Her room spun around her, and when she opened her eyes, she was standing in the palace garden. But it was no longer the garden she remembered. The trees were bare, the fountains were still. The sky was dark, though the sun had not yet set. The air was heavy, unmoving. There was no song, no colour, only silence, and there, in the very place she had dreamed it, lay the beast. "Beast!" she called out, rushing forward. He did not move. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands searching his face, his chest, his cold paw. "Beast, wake up, please! Wake up!" His eyes fluttered slightly, barely open. He gave a low sigh. "You came back," he murmured. "Of course I came back," she cried, tears falling freely now. "Oh, forgive me. I should never have left you." "I thought you had forgotten," he whispered. "But now I can die in peace." "No," she sobbed. "You must live. You must. I won't let you go." She bent over him, weeping, pressing her cheek to his. "I love you, beast," she whispered. "Please, don't leave me. I love you." The garden fell silent. Then suddenly a warm wind swept through the trees. The fountains burst to life. The flowers bloomed in a flash of colour and perfume. The skies above cleared, and the golden light of sunset poured down in brilliant rays, illuminating every corner of the palace grounds. Beauty gasped as the beast's body began to change beneath her hands. His heavy limbs lightened, his fur receded. His monstrous face softened, shifted, transformed. His breathing grew steady and strong. When she looked again, it was not the beast who lay before her, but the young man from her dreams. He opened his eyes, bright, kind, deeply familiar, and smiled. "Beauty," he said, "you have broken the spell." She stared at him in astonishment. "It was you," she whispered. "All this time. It was always you." "Yes," he said, taking her hand. "I was cursed to live as a beast until someone saw past what I appeared to be, and loved me for what I truly am. You, Beauty, have saved me." She could not speak, only held him tighter, overwhelmed with joy and wonder. Her tears now were not of sorrow, but of release, of love recognized and returned. The palace burst into brilliant light. The statues returned to life, once servants, once friends, restored to their true forms. The gardens sang. The birds took flight, their songs echoing high into the air. And in the heart of it all stood Beauty and the prince, hand in hand, their eyes full of love, their hearts bound forever, not by appearance, not by fear, but by truth, by kindness, and by the courage to see beyond what others could not. The spell was broken. The future, unwritten and full of promise, stretched before them. And the happily ever after had just begun. The transformation rippled through the palace like sunlight after a storm, every corridor lit up with warmth and music. The once still halls, which had echoed only with Beauty's footsteps and the beast's solemn tread, were now alive with laughter and voices, real, human voices. Tapestries once dulled by shadow now shimmered with vibrant colour, the golden chandeliers above casting rainbows across the polished floors. The scent of blooming citrus drifted in through newly opened windows, carried on a breeze that smelled like spring and second chances. The monkeys, the parrots, the clever birds who had danced and spoken, now servants in rich livery, grateful and beaming. They bowed and curtsied, their expressions filled with joy at being restored. The aviaries were no longer cages, but open gardens where songbirds sang freely, flying in and out of the trellised walls as if part of the very air itself. Even the statues that had once held torches or stood in still poses now moved with grace. Men and women who had been trapped in stone, freed by the lifting of the curse, blinking at the sunlight as if awakening from a long and dreamless slumber. Beauty hardly noticed any of it. She saw only him, her prince, the very one who had visited her dreams, who had spoken to her with such sweetness, who had pleaded with her to look past what her eyes could see. And she had, not soon enough to spare him pain, but soon enough to save him. They stood beneath the arching orange trees where they had first arrived. The prince held both her hands in his gaze steady, eyes glistening. "Everything I have is yours, Beauty," he said, his voice no longer rough or monstrous, but rich and warm, like music played in the quiet of night. "My heart has been yours since the moment you stepped into my palace." "I was blind," she said softly, her voice trembling. "You were always kind to me, always patient. I only wish I had known." "You saw the truth," he said. "Not with your eyes, but with your heart. That is all I ever hoped for." She smiled through tears. "And I love you for all that you are, in any form, then and now." With a look of joy too great for words, he led her inside, through the great doors now thrown open to light and celebration. Music swelled in the halls. Courtiers and servants alike knelt as they passed, some with tears in their eyes. The palace had become a home again, not just to him, but to all who had waited in silence and shadow for love to restore what magic had stolen. Within days, the whole kingdom had heard of the prince's return, of the mysterious enchantment broken by a girl with a kind heart and unwavering courage. Beauty's family was summoned to the palace, where they were received with honor. Her father, weeping with gratitude, blessed their union. Her brothers bowed with pride, their eyes gleaming with admiration. Even her sisters, humbled at last, could not help but marvel at the grace with which Beauty carried herself as a future queen. The wedding was held in the palace gardens under the flowering trees. Birds sang overhead. Bells rang across the land. The air was filled with music, perfume, and the laughter of people who had waited for a day such as this. Nobles and commoners alike gathered to witness the joining of two hearts that had found each other not by accident, but by fate. The prince and Beauty were married in a ceremony full of joy, simplicity, and love. The sky shone blue overhead, the sun bathing them in a golden light as they spoke their vows. And when they kissed, petals rained from above, not thrown, but drifting down as if the very trees themselves had given their blessing. And never again did Beauty dream of a stranger, because she now awoke each day beside the man she had once only seen in visions, the one who had taught her that appearances can deceive, but love, true love, reveals the heart. She had found not only a partner but an equal, a companion, a home. She ruled beside him with wisdom and kindness. The people adored her. The palace, once a place of sorrow and silence, echoed now with laughter, music, and light. Beauty walked its halls with confidence, remembered by all not for her looks alone, but for the depth of her heart and the clarity of her soul. And in the very centre of it all, in a quiet glass case in a garden filled with roses, sat the enchanted flower. Whole again, every petal restored, glowing softly as a symbol not of magic, but of love, perseverance, and belief in the unseen. It would never fade, and neither would their love. Together they wrote a new story, one not of curses and broken spells, but of kindness, trust, and the bravery it takes to open one's heart to the unknown. Their kingdom prospered, just as their love did, growing with each season, rooted in honesty and tended with joy. And thus, in the warm light of their shared life, they lived, not just happily ever after, but wisely and wonderfully, forever. Years passed, and the tale of Beauty and her beast, now the beloved prince, became legend. Parents told their children the story at night, how a young woman, gentle and brave, had gone to save her father and ended up saving an entire castle, an entire kingdom, by the strength of her heart alone. But within the palace, their life was not legend, it was real. Quiet moments and shared laughter, long walks in the gardens at dusk, and evenings spent by the fire reading aloud together from the vast library she had once wandered alone. Beauty, once a girl of humble joys and quiet resilience, became a queen admired not just for her loveliness, but for her insight, her fairness, and her uncommon ability to see what others overlooked. She governed with grace, her judgments sought not only in court, but throughout the realm. Villagers came to speak with her, bringing petitions and gifts, songs and troubles, and she listened, always listened, with a heart as open as the palace gates. She knew each corner of her land, each name in her household, each bird by song. She became more than a queen. She became a symbol of mercy, of wisdom, of a love that had once defied enchantment and fear. The prince, though freed from his curse, never forgot the lessons learned in his long solitude. Power had once made him proud, but love had taught him to be humble, to listen, to lead with mercy. Beside beauty, he ruled with compassion and wisdom, never taking for granted the second chance he had been given. He often walked the halls at night, stopping by the garden to watch the moonlight reflect on the canal, remembering the days when he was trapped not just in form, but in despair, and thanking the stars for the girl who had seen through it all. In the years that followed, the palace remained a place of wonder. Visitors came from across the world to see its enchanted halls, to hear birds speak in poetry and parrots sing in harmony, to watch monkeys still performing in courtly pageantry. The enchantments, though softened, had not vanished completely. They remained as echoes, gifts from the magic that had once both cursed and protected the castle. At night, soft lights would glow from no visible source. The grand mirrors whispered encouragement to the lonely. The harp in the music room sometimes played on its own, gentle tunes drifting like dreams into the halls. Beauty's family often visited. Her father spent his final years in peace at the palace, surrounded by his grandchildren, his eyes always shining with pride when he looked at his daughter. He often sat by the fire with the prince, recalling stories from long ago, or walked the gardens with Beauty, taking in the splendor that had once seemed unimaginable. Her sisters, changed by time and touched by her generosity, softened on the surface, though now and then a wistful glance or a faltering word hinted that their envy had not disappeared entirely, yet they had mellowed at last, though they never quite lost their sharpness. They too married, each in time discovering their own paths to contentment. Though they did not dwell in the palace, they visited often, and their children grew up playing side by side with Beauty's. Her brothers became trusted advisors, defending the realm with loyalty and honor. They built a school in the village near the palace, where children learned not only letters and numbers, but the stories of truth and kindness that Beauty had once lived herself. As for Beauty, she never longed for the city again. The palace, once a place of fear and mystery, had become her home. The orange blossoms in the avenue bloomed every spring. The canals shimmered under moonlight. The mirrored hall reflected not just her beauty, but the quiet strength she had carried since the day her world changed. Her love for the prince never dimmed. In his smile, in his voice, she always heard the echo of the first time he had asked, so gently, so hopefully, "Will you marry me?" And in the garden where the enchanted rose once lay beneath glass, a new rosebush grew, planted by Beauty and her prince. It bloomed year-round, petals deep red and soft as silk, never fading. Beneath it stood a small plaque carved in golden letters. "Let your heart judge truly, and love will show the way." So the story of Beauty and the Beast did not end with a wedding or with the breaking of a spell. It continued, quietly, beautifully, in the way that all real love stories do, in patience, in kindness, in seeing clearly what others cannot, in lifting others from darkness, in planting seeds for joy where sorrow once grew, and in the joy that follows when you do. And when, many years later, the time came for the beloved queen and her prince to leave the world they had transformed, they passed gently, their hands still entwined beneath the moonlight, surrounded by family and song. And it is said that on clear nights, when the wind moves through the orange trees and the roses sway in bloom, you can still hear her laughter and his voice beside her, whispering a tale that never truly ends. The end. And yet forever. And so ends the original tale of Beauty and the Beast, a story far richer than the versions we know today, woven with mystery, enchantment, and the transformative power of love. Thank you for joining us here at Fireside Classics, where forgotten gems like this one are brought back to life through gentle narration and timeless ambience. If this deeper version of Beauty and the Beast surprised or moved you, please leave a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and explore our growing library of cozy classic audiobooks, each one handpicked to soothe the soul and spark the imagination.